At Thanksgiving, my dad announced, "We're selling the family business. You get nothing." My siblings cheered. I smiled and asked, "Dad, who's the buyer?" He beamed. "Everest Holdings. They're paying $50 million." I laughed. "Dad, I am Everest Holdings." The room froze. Imagine sitting at Thanksgiving dinner, a meal meant for family, for gratitude, only to have your own father drop a bombshell that shatters everything you thought you knew. But what he didn't realize was that I was about to drop an even bigger one. A decade of being invisible, of being dismissed, was about to explode in a way no one saw coming. And trust me, the sweet taste of comeuppance has never been so satisfying. My name is Morgan Adams, and for 32 years, I was the forgotten middle child of the Adams software dynasty. I grew up in Brooklyn, one of Boston's wealthiest suburbs, in a sprawling colonial with 6 bedrooms, an indoor pool, and a lawn so big it needed 3 gardeners. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American success story. My grandfather, Robert Adams, started Adams Software Solutions in his garage back in '78. He built it from nothing, a true rags-to-riches tale, before my father, Harold, took over in '95. Under my dad's leadership, Adams Software exploded. It went from a $10 million family business to a $50 million enterprise with over 200 employees nationwide. Every holiday, every vacation, every single family barbecue, it all turned into a relentless celebration of his business genius. The Adams name became synonymous with success in Boston, and Dad never let anyone forget it, especially us, his children. There were 3 of us Adams kids. My older brother, Garrett, 38, was the golden child. Never showed any real aptitude for the business, majored in communications, partied his way through college, and still, Dad handed him a vice president position the day after graduation. Garrett spent more time on his yacht or with his rotating cast of girlfriends than in the office, but Dad remained utterly convinced he was the natural heir to the Adams throne. Then there was me, Morgan, perpetually stuck in the middle at 32. Unlike my siblings, I inherited my grandfather's genuine passion for technology. I taught myself coding at 12, built my first app at 15. I went to MIT, studied computer science and business, graduated summa cum laude, and had truly innovative ideas for modernizing the company. Yet, somehow, Dad always looked right through me during business discussions, as if I were invisible. My younger sister, Megan, 29, rounded out our trio. She leveraged our family name to become a lifestyle influencer, with hundreds of thousands of followers who adored her perfectly curated glimpses into old money New England living. Zero interest in software or business operations, but she never missed an opportunity to post about being an Adams software heiress, while contributing absolutely nothing to the company's success. And Mom? Diane came from old Boston money. She approached family conflict the way all proper Beacon Hill wives did, by ignoring it completely and pouring another glass of Chardonnay. She tried to play peacekeeper, but ultimately, she just enabled Dad's worst behaviors, especially his dismissal of my business acumen. "Harold, maybe you should listen to Morgan's idea," she'd occasionally suggest at dinner, only to immediately back down when Dad shot her that look. "Diane, please. This is actual business we're discussing," he'd say, turning back to Garrett to continue their conversation about golf or yacht clubs or whatever non-business topic they were actually discussing. Family gatherings always revolved around business talk that somehow, magically excluded me. Dad and Garrett would dominate conversations with industry jargon and inside jokes, while I sat there silently, despite understanding the technology and market better than either of them. If I even tried to contribute, Dad would just smile condescendingly and say something like, "That's sweet, Morgan," but leave the business discussions to the people who understand the real world. The breaking point, the moment that truly shattered my illusion, came when I was 22. Fresh out of MIT with honors, I had developed a cloud-based integration solution that could have revolutionized our product line years before competitors even entered that space. I spent months preparing a comprehensive business plan, market analysis, technical specifications. Dad finally agreed to let me pitch it during a board meeting, supposedly as a professional courtesy. I still remember walking into that mahogany-paneled boardroom, laptop and presentation materials in hand, my heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The board members, all men in their 50s and 60s who had been Dad's friends for decades, watched with polite but distant expressions as I connected my laptop to the projector. 10 minutes into my presentation, Dad checked his watch, sighed loudly, and raised his hand to stop me mid-sentence. "I think we've seen enough," he said with a tight smile that never reached his eyes. "Morgan, sweetheart, this is all very creative but completely impractical for a serious enterprise like ours. Our clients want stability, not experimental technologies." He turned to the board members with an apologetic shrug. "My daughter recently graduated college and is full of these academic ideas. Now, shall we move on to actual business matters?" The humiliation burned through me, searing hot, as I packed up my materials while they chuckled and moved on as if I had never even been there. That night, something inside me hardened. I made a decision that would change everything. I would leave Boston and the family business behind. I would build something of my own, something so successful that even my father couldn't dismiss it. I moved to San Francisco with $5,000 in savings and nothing else. My parents assumed it was just a phase, a tantrum. They indulged me with patronizing amusement. "She'll be back when she runs out of money," I overheard Dad telling Mom on the phone during one of our increasingly rare calls. Those early years were brutal. My tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood cost nearly my entire monthly budget. I survived on ramen noodles and coffee, working 80-hour weeks, first at entry-level coding jobs, then as a freelance developer. Every single dollar I could save went into building my own company. I created EVEREST Holdings under the pseudonym Emmy Stone. The Emmy stood for Morgan Elizabeth, but nobody knew that. I wanted my success or failure to be completely disconnected from the Adams name. I started small, developing custom enterprise solutions for startups, reinvesting every single profit. By year 3, I had 10 employees and a real office in Soma. The breakthrough came when I developed a proprietary integration platform that allowed legacy systems to communicate seamlessly with modern cloud services. Ironically, very similar to what I had pitched to my father years earlier. Venture capital came calling, but I maintained majority ownership, determined to control my own destiny. Over the next 7 years, I strategically acquired smaller tech companies that complemented our services. EVEREST Holdings grew to a staggering $200 million valuation with offices in 3 cities. Throughout it all, I maintained my pseudonym in all business dealings. In the tech world, Emmy Stone was known as a brilliant, reclusive founder who rarely gave interviews or appeared at industry events. When I absolutely had to make public appearances, I used subtle changes to my appearance and let my COO do most of the talking. My family remained completely unaware of my success. During holiday calls and occasional visits, I kept conversations vague, describing my work as doing okay or still figuring things out. Dad never pressed for details. He'd already written off my career as inconsequential. This suited me perfectly as I built EVEREST into something that would one day shock them all. What they didn't know was that, for the past year, I had been strategically acquiring shares in companies that were key suppliers and clients of Atom Software. I studied their quarterly reports, identified their weaknesses, and positioned EVEREST as the perfect buyer to take Atom Software to the next level. 6 months ago, I had my CFO send an anonymous acquisition offer through a third party, which my father predictably rejected without proper consideration. Now, 10 years after being humiliated in that boardroom, I was returning home for Thanksgiving with a plan that would change everything. Atom Software was struggling, losing market share with outdated technology. My father didn't know it yet, but I was about to become his worst nightmare and his only salvation. The week before Thanksgiving, I was in my corner office overlooking San Francisco Bay, finalizing the paperwork for what would be the most important deal of my life. My assistant knocked and entered with my travel itinerary. "Your private jet is confirmed for Tuesday at 11 a.m., she said, placing the folder on my desk. "Are you sure you don't want to bring your executive team to Boston for the signing?" I shook my head. "This is personal. I need to handle it alone." After she left, my phone rang. It was Isabella, my best friend since those early struggling days when we shared a wall in adjacent studio apartments. "Are you really going through with this family Thanksgiving charade?" she asked without preamble. "After everything they did? After 2 years of barely speaking to them?" I sighed, spinning in my chair to face the window. I have to be there in person when it happens, Isabella. I need to see his face. I remember the last Christmas disaster, she said carefully. Your father announced Garrett's promotion to executive vice president while you sat there with your unacknowledged series B funding round. You came back to California and didn't speak to them for months. The memory stung. Dad had raised a toast to the future of Atom's software while looking directly at my brother, who had been too hungover to contribute anything meaningful to the strategy meeting earlier that day. This time will be different, I promised. Everything changes this Thanksgiving. I spent the evening packing, deliberately choosing my wardrobe to make a statement. Gone were the casual clothes my family associated with me. Instead, I packed bespoke power suits, a Chanel dress for Thanksgiving dinner, Louis Vuitton heels, and the subtle signifiers of success that only the wealthy truly recognize. A Patek Philippe watch, a Bottega Veneta handbag, small diamond earrings from Tiffany. None of it ostentatious. All of it unmistakably expensive. After years of deliberately downplaying my success around my family, I wanted them to see glimpses of it before the final revelation. Tuesday morning, I boarded the private jet I rarely used, preferring commercial flights despite my wealth. This trip warranted the exception. During the 5-hour flight, I reviewed the contract once more, ensuring every detail was perfect. The irony was not lost on me. For years, I had flown coach to Boston, eating airplane peanuts and squeezing into middle seats while building the empire that would now allow me to arrive in style. The jet landed at a private airfield outside Boston. A black Bentley waited on the tarmac, another unusual indulgence I had arranged specifically for this trip. As we drove through familiar neighborhoods toward Brooklyn, I felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and a new, hardening determination within me. The Addams family estate looked exactly as it always had. Imposing colonial architecture, perfectly manicured grounds now dusted with November snow, a wreath already hanging on the door in preparation for the holiday season. I instructed the driver to wait, then took a deep breath before walking up the steps I had climbed thousands of times before. Mom answered the door herself, bypassing the housekeeper in her eagerness to see me. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in my appearance. "Morgan, darling," she said, embracing me, the scent of expensive perfume and the faint note of midday wine on her breath. "You look different. Is that a Rolex?" "Patek Philippe, actually," I said, returning her hug. "Good to see you, Mom." She ushered me inside, chattering about Thanksgiving preparations and Megan's latest Instagram milestone. I nodded politely, setting down my bag in the grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier. Home sweet home, with all its complicated memories. "Your father is in his study," Mom said. "He's been very busy with some big deal. Very hush-hush even with me." I smiled. "I'll say hello before I settle in." Dad's study had always been somewhat forbidden territory, a masculine sanctuary of leather, mahogany, and business journals. I knocked once and entered without waiting for a response, a small act of defiance. He looked up from his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, surprise flickering across his face before settling into his usual mild disinterest. "Morgan, you made it." He stood for a brief, awkward hug, then gestured vaguely toward the chair across from his desk. "The trip from California was good." "Very smooth," I said deliberately, not taking the offered seat. "I flew private. Saves time." A momentary confusion crossed his features. "Private? That must have been expensive." I shrugged. "Business is good." Before he could inquire further, his phone rang, and with a perfunctory, "Excuse me, this is important," he turned away to answer it. I used the opportunity to glance at the papers on his desk. There it was, the EVEREST Holdings acquisition proposal, with my company logo prominently displayed. My heart raced, but I maintained my composure as he finished his call. "Sorry about that," he said hastily, gathering the papers into a folder. "Big things happening at the company. You wouldn't understand." The familiar dismissal rolled off me like water now. "Of course, Dad. I'll let you get back to it." I left his study and headed upstairs to my old bedroom, which Mom had maintained as a shrine to my teenage self. Debate trophies, computer science awards, and MIT pennants still adorned the walls, dusty testaments to achievements that had never impressed the one person whose approval I had sought most. After freshening up, I headed downstairs and found Garrett in the living room, already drinking scotch at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He had her father's tall frame and confident posture, but years of privileged indulgence had softened him around the middle. Well, the prodigal sister returns, he said, raising his glass in mock toast. Still playing with computers in California? Something like that, I replied with a tight smile. How's your little startup doing? Making any money yet? His condescension was so familiar it almost felt like home. Before I could answer, Megan burst into the room, phone held at the perfect angle to capture her entrance for her Instagram followers. Morgan is here, everyone. Family reunion time, she announced to her phone before air-kissing my cheeks. You look expensive, sis. Did you finally find yourself a rich boyfriend? No, just working hard, I said, stepping out of her camera frame. Garrett brought his new girlfriend, Megan stage whispered, still recording. Amber, she's 24 and does yoga professionally. On cue, a willowy blonde entered the room, wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that highlighted her perfect figure. Garrett immediately pulled her to his side with proprietary pride. Amber, this is my sister Morgan. She lives in San Francisco and does tech stuff. His vague wave dismissed a decade of my professional accomplishments. Oh my God, I love San Francisco. Amber gushed. The shopping is amazing. Our awkward small talk was interrupted by the sound of Dad's raised voice from his study. Though the words were muffled, his excited tone carried through the house. Yes, absolutely. Tomorrow after Thanksgiving, $50 million is the final offer. EVEREST Holdings has been very insistent on the terms. I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment alone. The household staff had always been kinder to me than my own family. Maria, our housekeeper of 20 years, was preparing vegetables for tomorrow's feast. Miss Morgan, she smiled warmly. It is good to see you. You look well. California agrees with you. Thanks, Maria. Need any help? She shook her head. Your mother wants everything perfect for tomorrow. Big day, she says. Your father has news. I nodded, wondering if the entire household staff knew about the sale before his own children did. So I gathered. The pre-dinner drinks hour was excruciating. Mom fluttered about with forced cheerfulness. Dad checked his phone every 3 minutes. Garrett bragged about his new boat to anyone who would listen, and Megan documented everything for her followers. I sipped my wine slowly, observing the family dynamics with new eyes. No longer the hurt daughter seeking validation, but a successful businesswoman about to change the game entirely. Dinner is ready, Mom finally announced, ushering us toward the formal dining room where the family had gathered for holiday meals for 3 generations. I took a deep breath and followed them, knowing that by the time dessert was served, nothing would ever be the same. The Addams family Thanksgiving dinner had always been a formal affair. The massive mahogany dining table gleamed under the light of the crystal chandelier, set with a Wedgwood china that only emerged for special occasions. Sterling silver candelabras held ivory-tapered candles, casting a warm glow over the autumnal centerpiece of pumpkins, gourds, and fall foliage that Mom had undoubtedly commissioned from the most expensive florist in Boston. I noted with mild amusement that I had been seated at the far end of the table, as far from Dad at the head as physically possible. Typical. Garrett sat at Dad's right hand with Amber beside him, while Megan occupied the spot to Dad's left. Mom took her traditional place at the opposite end, with me beside her, symbolically separated from the inner circle of family business by the length of polished wood between us. Maria and the kitchen staff brought out course after course: butternut squash soup garnished with creme fraiche, harvest salad with candied walnuts and cranberries, and finally the turkey, a 25-pound bird roasted to golden perfection, accompanied by all the traditional sides. Dad carved with ceremonial precision while Megan filmed for her social media, providing running commentary. And here is Daddy carving the turkey, just like his father before him, continuing the Addams family tradition of excellence in everything they do. I caught Mom wincing slightly at Megan's performance before taking a large sip of her wine. By my count, it was her 4th glass since I had arrived. Once our plates were filled, Dad raised his glass for the traditional Addams family gratitude ritual. Another performance, where we each shared what we were thankful for this year. It had once been meaningful before it devolved into a competitive status report. Garrett went first, as the eldest always did. "I'm thankful for another record-breaking quarter at Adams Software," he began, though I knew from my research that the company had actually lost market share for the third consecutive quarter. "And for my new 42-foot yacht, the Adams Legacy," he squeezed Amber's hand, "and for new beginnings with this amazing woman." Amber giggled and kissed his cheek while Megan made exaggerated gagging motions when Garrett wasn't looking. Megan went next, phone still in hand. "I'm so thankful to have reached 1 million followers this year. My collaboration with Luxury Life Cosmetics has been amazing, and I'm grateful to be an Adams and represent our family brand to the world." She beamed at Dad, who nodded approvingly, though he had often complained privately about her frivolous career. When my turn came, I set down my fork and spoke clearly. "I'm thankful for the lessons life has taught me. That sometimes rejection leads to the right path, that persistence matters more than privilege, and that success is the best teacher." I raised my glass. "To finding your own way." Dad frowned slightly, perhaps detecting something in my tone, but quickly moved on to his own gratitude speech, which predictably centered on the business legacy he had built. Mom offered generic thanks for family and health, her words slightly slurred. Throughout the meal, Dad seemed distracted, checking his phone under the table and occasionally whispering to Mom, whose smile grew increasingly strained. Garrett dominated the conversation with stories about clients he had supposedly impressed, while Megan interrupted regularly to share comments from her followers watching her Thanksgiving Instagram story. As Maria brought in the pumpkin and pecan pies, Dad suddenly tapped his knife against his crystal water glass, the sharp ping cutting through the dinner conversation. "I have an announcement to make," he said, standing at the head of the table with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "One that affects everyone here." The table fell silent. Even Megan lowered her phone. "As you know, I have dedicated my life to building Adams Software into a leader in our industry. But all good things evolve, and the time has come for change." He paused dramatically. "I have decided to sell the company." Garrett choked on his wine. "What? Dad, you can't be serious." Dad raised his hand for silence. "I have been in negotiations for months with a very interested buyer. The deal will be finalized tomorrow." Megan gasped theatrically. "But Daddy, what about the Adams legacy? My brand is built around being an Adams software heiress." "That brings me to the second part of my announcement," Dad continued, his expression unreadable. "The proceeds from the sale will not be going to you children as inheritance." Now both Garrett and Megan erupted in protest. "That's our birthright." Garrett slammed his fist on the table, rattling the china. "What do you mean?" Megan wailed, now live-streaming the family drama to her followers. "Where is the money going?" Dad waited for their outbursts to subside. "Your mother and I will be using part of it for our retirement. The rest will go to establishing the Adams Foundation, a charitable organization to support technology education." "This is," Garrett stood, his face flushed with anger. "I have given 10 years to this company. You promised it would be mine someday. You promised all of us." Megan joined in, tears streaming down her face, though she kept her phone carefully angled to capture her most flattering, crying angle. Throughout the chaos, I remained perfectly still, taking small, deliberate bites of pecan pie. Mom noticed my calm and gave me a quizzical look. "Morgan," she said quietly, "you don't seem surprised." The table gradually quieted as everyone turned toward me, suddenly remembering my presence. "Actually," I said, setting down my dessert fork with precision, "I have just one question." I looked directly at my father. "Who is the buyer?" Dad's chest puffed with pride, pleased to have important information that we did not. "A very successful tech investment firm called EVEREST Holdings. They're paying $50 million, which is more than generous given our recent market challenges." I took a sip of water, using the moment to steady myself for what came next. The room felt charged with a strange electricity, the moment suspended between the past and future. "Dad," I said finally, my voice calm and clear, "I am EVEREST Holdings." The room went completely silent. I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, marking the seconds of frozen disbelief. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. The silence was absolute, as if the air itself had solidified around us. I watched the emotions play across my father's face in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, the first flickers of anger. Garrett was the first to react, knocking over his wine glass as he stood abruptly. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood, a vivid punctuation to the moment. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded, looking between Dad and me with growing panic. Megan, incredibly, was still live-streaming, her hand shaking as she captured what was quickly becoming the most dramatic content her followers had ever seen. "Oh my God," she whispered to her phone. "Did my sister just say she owns EVEREST Holdings, the company buying our family business?" Mom reached for her wine glass, found it empty, and promptly grabbed the bottle instead. I stood slowly, feeling a strange sense of calm after carrying this secret for so long. "Emmy Stone," I said. "Morgan Elizabeth Stone. That's the name I've been using professionally for the past decade while building EVEREST Holdings into a $200 million company." Dad found his voice at last. "This is preposterous," he sputtered. "EVEREST Holdings is run by Emmy Stone, a respected technology investor, not by my daughter, who has been playing at startups in California." I reached into my purse and removed my business card case, made of sleek, brushed platinum with the EVEREST Holdings logo engraved on its surface. I slid a card across the table toward him. "Actually, Dad, I am Emmy Stone. I founded EVEREST Holdings 10 years ago after you dismissed my business proposal and humiliated me in front of your board." Dad snatched up the card, staring at it as if it might transform in his hands. "This is some kind of joke," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "EVEREST Holdings now owns controlling interests in Nexus Technologies, DataStream Solutions, and Tech Core Industries," I continued, naming Atom Software's 3 largest suppliers. "We also recently acquired majority stakes in your 2 biggest clients, McKinsey Manufacturing and Westfield Distribution. The Atom Software acquisition is the final piece in a strategic plan I've been implementing for the past 18 months. You've been spying on our business," Garrett accused, his face mottled with rage. "That's corporate espionage." "No, Garrett. It's called market research. Everything I learned about Atom Software came from publicly available financial reports, industry analysis, and completely legal channels." I turned back to Dad. "The truth is, Atom Software has been failing for years. Your technology is outdated, your management practices are from the last century, and you've lost 22% market share in the past 3 years." "How dare you?" Dad began, but I cut him off. "I tried to help you first, you know. 6 months ago, EVEREST Holdings sent an anonymous partnership proposal that would have allowed the Atom's name to remain on the company while providing the capital and technology upgrades you desperately needed. You rejected it without even reading past the first page." Dad's eyes widened in recognition. "The Phoenix proposal? That was you." I nodded. "I wanted to give you a chance to accept help without knowing it came from me. Your pride wouldn't allow it. So this whole time you've been plotting against your own family," Garrett shouted. "Planning to steal our company." "Not steal, Garrett. Purchase legally. For $50 million, which is honestly more than its current market value." I kept my voice level despite the emotional storm brewing inside me. "And let's be clear, this company stopped being our family business the day Dad made it evident that only one child would ever have a meaningful role in it, despite that child's complete lack of qualifications or interest in technology." Megan finally lowered her phone, the reality of the situation apparently sinking in. "So, you're going to be our boss now?" she asked in a small voice. "Technically, yes," I confirmed, "though the current management structure will be completely reorganized." Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "This deal is off," he declared. "I will not sell my company to my own daughter as some kind of revenge plot." I shook my head slowly. "The contracts are signed, Dad. The board has approved the sale. The press release goes out tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Legally, EVEREST Holdings already owns Atom Software." "I'll fight this," he threatened, though the uncertainty in his eyes told me he already knew I had outmaneuvered him. "My lawyers will." "Your lawyers have already vetted the deal extensively," I interrupted gently. "They advised you. It was the best offer you would get in the current market. What exactly will you tell them now? That you're upset because the brilliant CEO you've been negotiating with turns out to be your daughter. Mom spoke for the first time since my revelation. Her words slightly slurred, but her gaze surprisingly clear. All these years, Morgan, all these years you were building this while you thought I was failing, I finished for her. Yes, exactly. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You have a choice to make right now, Morgan. You can be my daughter, or you can be the person who took my company. You cannot be both. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. So predictable, it almost made me sad. 10 years ago, it would have devastated me. Now, it merely confirmed what I had always known. That is where you are wrong, Dad, I said quietly. I am both. I always have been. You just refuse to see it. Megan had started crying in earnest now, mascara tracking down her perfectly contoured cheeks. What happens to us? To our trust funds? Our positions? That depends, I answered honestly, on whether you want to actually work for the company or just claim its benefits. Garrett pointed an accusing finger at me. You planned this for Thanksgiving deliberately, didn't you? To humiliate us in front of the whole family. I planned it for Thanksgiving because I knew everyone would be here, I corrected him. And because 10 years ago at Thanksgiving dinner, Dad announced that he was promoting you to vice president despite your complete lack of qualifications, while telling me my degree from MIT and 3 years of coding experience wasn't enough to warrant even an entry-level management position. Dad's face flushed at the reminder. That was different. Garrett is my son, my firstborn. And there it is, I said softly. The real reason I was never given a chance. Not my ideas, not my education, not my work ethic, just my gender. The painful truth silenced the room again. Even Garrett had the grace to look uncomfortable. This conversation is over. Dad finally declared. Everyone out. I need to call my attorneys. He stormed from the dining room, the sound of his study doors slamming, echoing through the house moments later. Mom rose unsteadily to her feet. I should go check on him, she murmured, though she paused beside my chair. Are you really worth $200 million? I nodded. And all those times you couldn't come home for Christmas because you said you couldn't afford the plane ticket. I was running a company, Mom, and I needed you all to keep underestimating me. She touched my shoulder briefly, an unreadable expression on her face, then followed after Dad. As the dining room emptied, I remained seated, looking at the abandoned Thanksgiving feast around me. The turkey had grown cold, the candles burned low, and the family I had once desperately wanted to impress had scattered in shock and anger. It should have felt like victory. Instead, a hollow ache spread through my chest as I realized that while I had finally earned their attention, I was further than ever from earning their understanding. I retreated to my childhood bedroom as the house descended into chaos below. Through the floor, I could hear Dad shouting on the phone, presumably to his lawyers, while Mom's placating tones rose and fell in counterpoint. Occasionally, Garrett's angry voice would join the cacophony, followed by Megan's dramatic wailing. My old room remained frozen in time, a museum to the person I had been. The twin bed with its navy blue comforter, the desk where I had spent countless hours coding and dreaming, the bookshelves lined with computer science textbooks and the few fantasy novels I had allowed myself as rare indulgences. Debate trophies and academic medals gathered dust on the shelves, achievements that had never impressed the one person whose approval I had sought most. I ran my fingers along the spines of my old journals, pulling one out at random. Inside were detailed business plans, algorithm sketches, and notes for the very cloud integration platform that had eventually become EVEREST's flagship product. The irony was not lost on me that everything I had built had begun right here, in the room where I had felt most invisible. A sharp knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Garrett, his tie loosened and face flushed with either anger or alcohol, possibly both. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the room without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "About what, Garrett? How I ruined your Thanksgiving, or how you plan to inherit a company you helped run into the ground." "You think you're so clever," he hissed, pacing the small space like a caged animal. Little Morgan with her computers, and her secret identity. Did you enjoy lying to our faces all these years? About as much as you enjoyed taking credit for my ideas, I replied evenly. Remember when I suggested Adam's software should move to cloud-based solutions 6 years ago during Christmas dinner? Dad dismissed it as trendy tech jargon, but somehow 3 months later, you presented the exact same concept as your own strategic vision. Garrett stopped pacing, his expression darkening. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who put in the time at the company while you ran off to California to prove some point. You put in time? Yes, but what did you actually contribute, Garrett? Besides expenses on the company credit card for client dinners at strip clubs and a corner office you used primarily for naps between hangovers. His face contorted with fury. You don't know what you're talking about. I brought in the Westfield account. Westfield came to Atom Software because I personally reached out to their CTO as Emmy Stone and recommended your services as part of my long-term acquisition strategy. I informed him. And I know exactly what I'm talking about because I've been auditing the company remotely for the past year as part of my due diligence, including the financial records you thought were only accessible on the local server. The color drained from his face. What are you saying? I know about the $300,000 you embezzled through fake vendor accounts, Garrett. I know about the phantom consulting fees that went directly to your personal offshore account. I know everything. He took a threatening step toward me. You can't prove any of that. I have transaction records, account numbers, and IP logs showing the falsified entries came from your office computer on days when only you were present in the building. I held his gaze steadily. I'm not planning to pursue criminal charges, Garrett. That would hurt the company during the transition, but don't test me. You, he whispered, hands clenching into fists at his sides. You would destroy your own brother. I would hold accountable a thief who happens to be related to me. I corrected him. There is a difference. We stood in tense silence until he finally turned away. This isn't over, he warned, yanking open the door. Actually, it is, I said to his retreating back. You just don't realize it yet. I had barely closed the door when another knock came. This time it was Megan, her makeup freshly touched up despite the tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. So, you were like a secret millionaire, she said without preamble, entering my room and immediately sitting on my bed. That's actually kind of badass. I couldn't help but laugh at her rapid pivot. Is that what you were going with 5 minutes ago? You were crying about losing your heiress status. She shrugged, examining her manicure. I'm adaptable. It's essential for influencer longevity. She looked up with sudden calculation in her eyes. Just think of the content we could create together. My sister, the tech mogul. My followers would eat that up. Is that why you're here, Megan? To propose a business collaboration. More like a mutual arrangement, she said, smoothing her dress. You need a media presence for your company that humanizes you. And I need an authentic connection to actual business success instead of just looking pretty with products. The nakedly transactional nature of her proposal was so typically Megan that I almost admired it. And what about actually working for the company? Learning the business? Contributing something beyond your Instagram aesthetic? She wrinkled her nose. God, no. Coding is boring and business meetings make me want to die. But I could be like the brand ambassador, the face of the company for the lifestyle market, the face of an enterprise software integration platform for the lifestyle market. I repeated slowly, Do you hear yourself? Megan stood, straightening her shoulders. Fine. Mock me like everyone else in this family. But my social media skills are actually valuable in today's market, whether you respect them or not. I've built my own brand from nothing, just like you did. The parallel had never occurred to me before, and I found myself momentarily speechless. There was a strange kind of truth to it, though our methods and values diverged dramatically. I'll think about it, I said finally, but not tonight. She nodded, apparently satisfied with even this small concession. Just so you know, I've already posted about a major family business shakeup without specifics. My engagement is through the roof. After she left, I sat at my old desk, powering up my laptop to check on the final details for tomorrow's announcement. A gentle knock interrupted me again. Come in, I called, expecting perhaps Maria with tea or one of the household staff. Instead, Mom entered, looking surprisingly sober given the amount of wine she had consumed at dinner. She had changed from her dinner dress into a cashmere sweater and slacks, her armor of Boston society, wife, temporarily set aside. "Your father has locked himself in his study with a bottle of scotch and the company bylaws," she said, settling into the window seat where she used to sit and read me stories as a child. "He's convinced there must be some loophole to stop the sale." "There isn't," I said simply. "His lawyers already confirmed it." She nodded, looking around the room, thoughtfully. "You know, I kept everything exactly as you left it. I always thought you would come back once you got this rebellion out of your system." "It was never a rebellion, Mom. It was a career, a life." $200 million, she mused, shaking her head slightly. "My little girl built a company worth $200 million in secret while we all thought you were struggling." I turned to face her fully. "You could have asked, Mom. Any of you could have shown genuine interest in what I was doing, but none of you ever really wanted to know." Tears welled in her eyes. "I knew, Morgan. Not the details, not the scale of your success. But I knew you were special. I saw it when you were little. The way your mind worked differently. How you understood things the rest of us couldn't grasp." She wiped at her cheeks. "I just didn't know how to help you in a family like ours, with a man like your father." "You could have stood up for me," I said, the old hurt rising unexpectedly in my throat. "All those times he dismissed me, humiliated me. You just sat there." "I was wrong," she admitted quietly. "I told myself I was keeping the peace, being a supportive wife. But I failed as a mother when you needed an advocate." The simple acknowledgement pierced something long frozen inside me. I had come prepared for anger, for accusations, even for legal threats. I had not prepared for genuine remorse. "What happens now?" Mom asked after a long silence. "Tomorrow morning, the acquisition becomes public. Adams Software will become a subsidiary of EVEREST Holdings. The company name will remain for now, but operations will be completely restructured." I hesitated, then added, "Dad and Garrett will be offered advisory positions with no actual authority if they want them, mostly for appearance's sake during the transition." "And you? Will you move back to Boston?" I shook my head. "I'll remain in San Francisco. We'll install a new management team here." She nodded, seeming to understand all I was not saying, that I had outgrown this house, this family dynamic, this version of myself. "Your father may never forgive you for this," she warned softly. "I know," I acknowledged, "but this isn't about forgiveness, Mom. It's about finally being seen." After she left, I worked until dawn, preparing for the morning's confrontation, ignoring the texts from Isabella asking for updates. As the first gray light of morning filtered through my curtains, I changed into one of my Armani suits, styled my hair into a sleek chignon, and put on the subtle makeup that Emmy Stone was known for in her rare public appearances. The morning would bring either a new beginning for the Addams family or its final fracturing. Either way, I was ready. The kitchen was eerily quiet when I came down at 7 a.m. Maria silently handed me a cup of coffee, her eyes communicating a mixture of concern and respect. The formal dining room had been cleared of last night's Thanksgiving disaster. No evidence remaining of the family explosion except the lingering tension in the air. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my executive team, eager for updates on the acquisition announcement scheduled for 9 a.m. A text from Isabella. Asterisk, did you drop the bomb? Are they still breathing? Asterisk, I had just finished responding when Dad appeared in the doorway of the kitchen. He looked older than he had yesterday, the lines around his eyes deeper, his normally perfect posture slightly stooped. He had clearly not slept. "My study now." His tone left no room for discussion. I followed him down the hallway to the room that had always been the center of Adams' family power. The wood-paneled walls were covered with framed accolades, business journal covers featuring Dad, industry awards, photos with politicians and celebrities. Conspicuously absent was any recognition of my achievements, though my MIT graduation photo sat on a side table, half hidden behind more prominent family pictures. Dad took his seat behind the massive desk, a position he had used to intimidate business rivals for decades. I chose not to sit in the visitor's chair as expected. Instead, I perched on the edge of the desk itself, a subtle, Repositioning of our power dynamic that did not go unnoticed. My attorneys confirm what you said last night. He began without preamble. The sale is legally binding. The board vote was unanimous. Of course it was, I replied. Adam's software has been losing market share for 3 years. Your technology is outdated, your management structure is bloated, and your development pipeline is empty. The board recognized a good offer when they saw it. $50 million, he said, shaking his head. The company was valued at $70 million just 2 years ago. The company was overvalued 2 years ago, I corrected, and I offered more than any other potential buyer would have. Most would have stripped the assets and dissolved the Adams name entirely. He looked up sharply. And is that your plan? To erase your own family legacy? No. Despite everything, I respect what grandfather built and what you expanded. The Adams name stays, though the company structure will change significantly. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his features. What exactly are your plans? I had waited 10 years for him to ask my opinion on business matters. The irony was not lost on me. Adams Software will become the enterprise division of EVEREST Holdings, focusing on updating your legacy products and integrating them with our cloud platforms. We will retain approximately 60% of the current staff, with significant changes to upper management. And me? He asked, the question clearly costing him. You will be offered a position as chairman emeritus. No operational authority, but you will maintain an office and can advise on client relationships during the transition. His jaw tightened. A figurehead role. A respected advisory position, I countered, with full benefits and a generous compensation package. He stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the immaculately maintained garden. For a long moment he said nothing, his back to me as he stared out at the property that generations of Adam's success had built. How did you do it? He finally asked, his voice quieter now. Build something that valuable when you had nothing? No connections, no startup capital. I had my education, I reminded him. The one thing you couldn't take from me. And I had tremendous motivation to prove you wrong. He turned back to face me. I expected you to fail. 90% of startups never make it past the first 3 years. I thought, he hesitated, seeming to struggle with the words. I thought I was protecting you from inevitable disappointment. By ensuring I never got the chance to try. I raised an eyebrow. That's not protection, Dad. That's control. He flinched slightly at the accusation. Perhaps. I built this company from what my father started. Expanded it 10 times over. I thought I knew best. But you didn't, I said simply. You were wrong about me. Wrong about the direction of the industry. Wrong about Garrett being the natural successor. At the mention of my brother, Dad's expression darkened. Garrett may have his flaws, but he has been loyal to this company. Garrett has been embezzling from the company for at least 3 years, I informed him bluntly. I have all the documentation. That's part of why I moved now, before he could do more damage. Dad sank back into his chair, the shock of this new revelation apparently too much to process while standing. That cannot be true. $300,000 siphoned through fake vendor accounts. The evidence is irrefutable. Why would he need to steal? He makes a generous salary, has a trust fund. Gambling debts, I said. Sports betting, mostly from what I can tell. Dad buried his face in his hands briefly before looking back up, suddenly appearing every one of his 68 years. So both my son and my company were failing, and I was too blind to see either. The naked vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. I had expected more anger, more accusations, not this broken acceptance. Not blind, I said, softening my tone slightly, just looking in the wrong direction. A long silence stretched between us, filled with decades of misunderstanding and missed opportunities. When he finally spoke again, his voice had changed, the arrogance replaced with something approaching genuine curiosity. How did you do it? He asked. Really? No connections, no investors who knew the Adams name. How did you build something so successful? I considered deflecting, but there was something in his question that seemed sincere for the first time in our relationship. I started small, I explained. Freelance development work to build capital. Then I created a proprietary integration platform that solved a problem every enterprise company has, connecting legacy systems with modern cloud architecture. It was actually based on the proposal you dismissed when I was 22. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, the one with the middleware solution. I nodded, surprised he remembered even that much. Yes, I refined it, made it more adaptable, used it to attract our first major clients, reinvested every profit, lived in a studio apartment eating ramen for 3 years to keep overhead low, built a team of brilliant people who believed in the vision. Without the Adams name to open doors, he mused. Because of that, in some ways, I corrected. Being underestimated is a powerful position if you know how to use it. No one saw me coming. He almost smiled at that. Clearly not. Another silence fell, but different now, less hostile. I checked my watch. The press release goes out in 45 minutes. We should discuss next steps. What about Garrett and Megan? He asked. Garrett will be offered a choice. Resign quietly with a reasonable severance or face potential legal consequences for the embezzlement. Megan. I paused. Considering Megan actually made a compelling case last night for serving as a brand ambassador, her social media skills are legitimately valuable in the right context. Dad looked genuinely surprised. You'd keep them involved? After everything? This was never about destroying the family, Dad. It was about claiming my place in it on my terms. He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the papers on his desk, then rising again to meet mine with unexpected directness. You outmaneuvered me completely, he said, and I was startled to detect a note of something almost like pride in his voice. Your grandfather would have been impressed. Coming from him, it was as close to approval as I had ever received. I felt a complicated emotion rising in my chest. Not quite vindication, not quite forgiveness, but something hovering in the space between. I learned from watching you, I acknowledged, even when you didn't think I was paying attention. He extended his hand across the desk. So, Chairman Emeritus? I took his hand, sealing the first professional agreement we had ever made as equals. Welcome to EVEREST Holdings, Dad. 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, I stood in the newly renovated headquarters of Adams Everest Technologies. The former Adams software building had been transformed with open workspaces, state-of-the-art technology, and a collaborative environment that respected the company's history while embracing its future. My role as CEO of EVEREST Holdings meant I split my time between San Francisco and Boston, overseeing the integration of the two companies and the evolution of our expanded product line. The transition had not been easy, but it had been more successful than even my optimistic projections had anticipated. Dad had surprised everyone by embracing his chairman emeritus role with unexpected grace. Once the initial shock and anger had subsided, he found satisfaction in mentoring younger team members and maintaining relationships with long-standing clients. We had established a weekly meeting where he could offer insights on company history and industry relationships, and I found myself actually looking forward to these sessions. For the first time, we were building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than expectations and disappointments. Garrett's situation had been more complicated. After facing the evidence of his embezzlement, he had initially threatened legal action against both me and the company. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed when he realized his options were limited. He accepted a conditional offer: repayment of the stolen funds, resignation from his executive position, and enrollment in an MBA program if he wanted any future role in the business. To my surprise, he chose education over exile and was now halfway through his first semester, calling occasionally with genuine questions about business strategy. Megan had flourished in her new role as brand ambassador for our consumer products division, a small but growing part of the business that benefited from her social media expertise. Her followers had been captivated by the dramatic family business saga, which she carefully presented as a story of female empowerment and family reconciliation rather than the more complex reality. Her Tech Heiress rebrand had actually opened doors to younger markets we had previously struggled to reach. Mom had perhaps changed the most. She started volunteering with women's education initiatives and even joined the board of a tech incubator for female founders. I want to help other girls like you, she told me, so their mothers don't make the same mistakes I did. As I walked through the office, employees nodded respectfully or smiled in greeting. I was no longer Emmy Stone, the mysterious founder, nor Morgan Adams, the forgotten middle child. I was simply Morgan, the CEO, who had modernized a failing family business and created new opportunities for everyone involved. My assistant interrupted my thoughts. "Your father is waiting in the conference room with the quarterly reports," she informed me, "and your mother called to confirm dinner tonight with the potential investors." I thanked her and headed toward the meeting, pausing briefly by the newly installed company timeline in the main lobby. It displayed the evolution of Adams software from my grandfather's garage startup to our current iteration as Adams EVEREST Technologies. My photo now hung alongside those of my grandfather and father, 3 generations of leadership, with my own achievements listed with the same prominence as theirs. Thanksgiving was approaching again, and this year would be entirely different. We had planned a smaller, more intimate family dinner without the performative traditions that had dominated our previous gatherings. No formal gratitude ritual, no business posturing, just a family still learning how to truly see and hear each other. The journey from rejection to leadership had been longer and more painful than I could have imagined when I left Boston 10 years ago. The challenges of merging family and business continued daily, requiring patience and perspective I was still developing. There had been moments when the weight of past hurts threatened to overwhelm the progress we had made, when old patterns of communication emerged in tense meetings or family dinners. The hardest part had not been the acquisition itself, but the ongoing work of building relationships that could withstand both our shared history and our current professional roles. Dad still occasionally slipped into his authoritarian approach before catching himself. I sometimes found myself unnecessarily defensive, anticipating dismissal that no longer came. Yet, slowly, conversation by conversation, the Adams family was creating a new dynamic. Mom had hosted a dinner last month where, for the first time in my memory, everyone spoke equally. Everyone listened, and no one stormed out in anger. Small victories, but meaningful ones. Perhaps the most profound moment had come unexpectedly during a late night at the office when Dad and I were reviewing the first quarter results after the merger. The numbers had exceeded all projections, with client retention at 98% and new contracts increasing revenue by 32%. "You know," he had said quietly, staring at the spreadsheet, "you've already accomplished more than I did in my first decade running this company." The simple acknowledgement had healed something in me that I had not realized was still broken. Not because I needed his validation professionally anymore, but because it represented the human recognition I had sought all along. The experience had taught me that success itself is not enough to heal family wounds. The satisfaction of proving myself had been sweet, but ultimately hollow, until it led to genuine connection. I had needed to learn that there is a difference between winning and resolving, between being right and being whole. As I entered the conference room where Dad waited with the quarterly reports, I reflected on how complex the journey had been from that Thanksgiving revelation to today. The lesson I carried forward was not that success is the best revenge, but that success without reconciliation leaves both sides poorer. True victory came not when I proved my father wrong, but when we both found a way to be right together,